Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me submit a video for you today. My name is Timothy Braun, and I'm with the writing program. The reason why I'm unable to attend today is that I teach at another university on the day that we are doing this, and it's my seniors that are presenting their senior capstone project. And I apologize, I was unable to cancel their senior projects, of course. But instead, I do want to talk a little bit about what I've been doing for basically the past academic year. With this video, I have with me Mark Gifford, who is a professor in the writing program with me. We share an office. He is also the technology coordinator for the writing program, and he is a person who I often do best practices with, bounce ideas off of, and he has come prepared with some questions, knowing something of what I've been doing with my fund for the past academic year, some of my research, and has even participated in some of my tomfoolery. He will also be editing this video, which I imagine is also very possibly going to have some colorful and interesting things. At least I'm hoping he does. All right, for this video, we've essentially broken it down into 4 sections. The first section, the introduction, which you just saw. The second section will involve what I've done in the past to give you some context. Then I'm also going to go to a third section in where I tell you what I've been doing for the past year. And the fourth section is where Professor Gifford will be asking me questions and to relate perhaps some of the jargon from my perspective to perhaps people who may not know exactly what I'm talking about or not have the perfect definition of what I'm talking about. So now with the first section, I've been with UTSA since 2006 with the writing program. And it was about 7 years ago, I got very interested into multimodal learning and multimodal writing. And that is that I'm looking at multiple concepts, multiple ideas for a basic student learning outcome for a project, if you will. And when I'm looking at those, I started doing papers in my classes, not all papers, but some papers that would be along the lines of you have to analyze a project, perhaps a topic, and create a online comic book and then write a self-reflective paper that goes with it, arguing the principles of argumentation that we use in the writing program to ultimately say, well, this is how I picked this one picture, or this is how I chose that these colors in the comic book would go with it. Another very popular one that I use was building a mixtape. You would analyze, let's say, climate change. And I'll talk more about climate change in just a moment. But you'll analyze climate change and you'll build a mixtape online, if you will, for songs that have to do with how you feel about climate change. But more importantly, you would also have to write a self-reflective paper using perhaps the Tolman system of argumentation to back up your research as to what you did, as far as it wasn't just hammering together songs, but you actually had to have things like data that's in the self-reflective paper. And in the process of going about these multimodal projects that became very popular, I began to look into other aspects of what we could possibly use as far as our students are concerned. Now, I said I got here in 2006, and the one thing I noticed in 2006, at the beginning of every class, I had to tell the class to calm down and be quiet. Why? Because they were all talking with each other. But in 2006, we had very different students. That was really before everybody had a smartphone. And over the years, well, the class becomes more and more quiet. The students don't talk with each other the way. Sometimes they're texting with each other in the context of class. But I wanted to see how I could engage the student with some of the things that we look to do in the writing program and with argumentative writing as a whole, and how can we use, for lack of a better term, what they're using. I'm still quite impressed with my iPhone. It can take pictures, it can play music when I want, it can play games, but there's a lot of other things it can do as well. And so I began to look around at things like virtual reality, and I began to look around at augmented reality, and could we possibly engage students to be thinking about argumentative writing as far as virtual reality and augmented reality is concerned. So the first thing I did was I wanted to look at several of the prompts that my colleagues have. A very good example of this would be our colleague Lindsay Radcliffe, who does a topic-specific argumentative class devoted to environmentalism. And of course, she has a paper, I believe, at least she used to, devoted to things like climate change and looking at data as far as climate change is concerned. And I took a box. And I initially had this for a creative writing class. But inside this box are several elements to ultimately tell a story. And this is something that has a giant scarf in it, if you will, fake snow in it. I'd be happy to pull it all out, but it gets to be a little bit messy, if you will. And I wanted to see, outside of research, could we also, just good old-fashioned academic library research, could we also engage the student with a prompt that had some kind of physicality to it? Well, it just wasn't very realistic to ask all of my students to research climate change, and here's a box with fake snow in it, and what do you think about it? Well, other ways to engage the student, I began to look at things like Google Cardboard. Now, this is a very affordable piece. I'm sure many of you have seen something like this. It's where you take your iPhone, of course, and you jam it into this thing, and you strap it onto your face. And, well, you're in a virtual world, for lack of a better term. This is relatively unrealistic, at least at this point in time. Google Cardboard is much more affordable than an Oculus Rift. I was fortunate enough to play with Oculus Rifts in the process of doing the research for this. I found it to be very fascinating. It would help me go into a much different world as far as, well, doing all of my research is concerned, but it just wasn't quite realistic. And so as I began to speak with more people, and I was going to conferences and doing more experimentations with things like, well, can we engage the students with what they already have, even free programming such as Instagram? I began to learn that it was really augmented reality that I believe is something that we can take and develop and work with the students with technology that they already have in their palms. Or if not, we can break them up into groups, and it'd be quite simple for them to develop various multimodal projects that come back to their own world at this point in time. Again, this is stuff that I wouldn't be doing back in 2006 because the students were just different. What I'm looking to do is create multimodal projects for students here, now, today. I'd like to start with a definition of what virtual reality is. Virtual reality is where a computer is constantly building. You go inside a world where a computer has built, well, a different reality for you to be all around, for lack of a better term. An idea for this is that if you think of the movie Lawnmower Man, this came out multiple decades ago now, but you put on a headset, you've probably seen this, and you go into a computer-generated world. More recent examples would be The Matrix as a very good example. Also Ready Player One, which is very popular and came out just last year by Steven Spielberg. That's where you put on some kind of headset and you're going into that computer-generated world for a very specific reason. The world is created for a reason. An augmented reality, however, that's something that has multiple definitions, and I'm going to try to lay this out as easily as I possibly can. I think a more common definition of augmented reality would be something along the lines of you have your reality, but a computer is throwing up images to augment it, for lack of a better term. But examples of this would be, well, you know what a really good example of this would be is that if you pick up your cell phone and you look at Pokemon Go. The first time I played Pokemon Go, I was with my fiance and we were having, and it was all the rage. It was a couple of years ago, and we decided to download it. And there in real time, looking through my camera, I can see the street. We were in Colorado, and then a monster showed up literally right there on my phone, and I captured it. I'm very proud of that. And we're seeing more and more things like that. But as I began to do my research, I had to go to New York City twice, once for the New York Film Festival and once for the Under the Radar Festival. Both times I had to go to Lincoln Center, and I was working with Columbia University's digital storytelling unit, and with a guy named Lance Wheeler. And what Lance was having us do, a whole bunch of, well, people like me getting all into one room, we took Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, and we were going to create an audio manipulation of it, depending on where you were within the context of Lincoln Center. We were going to create a not really a podcast, but something that can change depending on where you're at in the room. And that's when I began to talk with Lance about this. And he thought the definition of augmented reality can even get more augmented, if you will. And when I say augmented, I'm talking about something that maybe even our students and everybody in the room does on a daily basis, is that you're changing your reality with the technology that you have. One example would be just yesterday. I have a student who has anxiety. He has difficult times being in the room or at least communicating with people. He is a little bit shy, and on occasion he has requested that he takes his earphones and plugs them in so he can listen to music and go back inside sort of a box as he works on a journal or as he works on a writing assignment. And he's augmenting his reality. He's changing it to a place where he's more comfortable with, and so he can approach his assignment on a level that at least is more intuitive for himself. From a practical standpoint, I think it's easier than I initially thought it was going to be, especially with we emphasize the cell phone, something that the technology that students already have for the most part. As far as a prompt versus perhaps creating a project, at this moment in time, I don't see how I'm going to be using it in a prompt. Now, that doesn't mean I will still explore that option. I do see it more as a creation level piece that I can use with students. A good example of this is I've been using Instagram with the students, and I have created a Professor Braun Instagram account. And I give them all a password, and I break them up into groups. And then what I do is I give them the mission statement of the university, and they have to analyze it. They got to slice it up. They've got to edit it. They ultimately have to look at it from a rhetorical standpoint. And then they have 30 minutes to run around campus and visually interpret the mission statement as they see it, as they see their own campus with the light of the mission statement. In the process, that of course is visual argumentation. What I'm thinking about doing from an AR standpoint is seeing if we can have students build sort of walking tours of UTSA using the mission statement, but using their own voice, their own words, how they interpret the campus as a whole and the mission statement as a whole. So you can walk around campus and listen to this, and of course use a self-reflective paper arguing why are they doing the things that they're doing within that audio, and what are the the process of argumentation, that they used as far as arguing what UTSA is. One major challenge that I think is that although I continually bring up that students already have this technology, some of them don't. And that's definitely a concern in my mind. And in the process, of course, I'd have to do a great deal of group work just to make sure that no student felt left out, no student felt lesser, no student felt like another. But another process that I really want to be thinking about here, as far as a pedagogical concern, is that I believe, especially with the student learning outcomes of the writing program and as just our core curriculum, I think that these kinds of assignments should be considered as very different and also fun, but I'm concerned that perhaps that all students will be expecting something along the lines of, well, every paper they're going to write, they're going to do something with their cell phone. And I'm a firm believer that we want to have a well-rounded student at UTSA from a writing perspective. So the papers that are more research-based, you go into the library, you get your data, you get your peer-reviewed academic journals, and you sit down and you write a 5-page paper with MLA citation. All of a sudden, that might become something as a punishment or something along the lines of not as fun. The reason why I bring this up is because when I used to build the projects with the students about 5 to 7 years ago with comic books and self-reflective papers and mixtapes and self-reflective papers. Most of my student evals would be along the lines of, well, my favorite project was the multimodal project, but then we also had to do all these other boring projects. And so that might be something that I'm a little concerned about. Uh, in conclusion, I just want to thank you very much once again for this auspicious occasion. It was truly an amazing academic year for me. With this funding and the research that I did, I'm going to continue to take this research, move forward with it by applying for conferences of various kinds, the 4Cs, South by Southwest EDU. As I hammer this together, I believe I'm going to apply for a TED Talk as well, and I'm going to put together some online material to share with all of my colleagues and the University of Texas, San Antonio as a whole. I also just wanted to thank my colleagues very quickly. They've been very supportive and helped me greatly with a little bit of peer review as I've been hammering together assignments and thoughts and ideas. And last but most certainly not least, the person here who's helping me today, Professor Mark Gifford, he is, once again, he's our technology coordinator for a very good and special program. And this is the guy that if you want to shoot a video of you when you can't make a conference meeting, presentation, anything, call this guy because he will make you look very, very pretty.